I've only had the pleasure of meeting Lorraine 15 years ago, but it became apparent very quickly the type of person that she was. I could probably compare her to my mother-in-law, because people back that age had a thing about never having bad to say about anybody. Not like today. But if I could make a comparison with Lorraine, the comparison would probably have been that of Mother Teresa. Where Mother Teresa was a teacher, so was Lorraine. And I never heard her say a bad word about anyone. She was always looking forward to something that was going to happen in your life, her life, or anybody else's. She had a curiosity about the future. And I think she held that until the day she died. And I'm very happy to find out that her last days were only entailed in one bad day. And I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Proverbs 31, the virtuous wife. This suits Lorraine because this is how she was. She was there for everybody. Didn't matter how old, didn't matter how young. She was the type of person that kept herself busy. If she sat down for 5 minutes to do nothing, that was big for her. Because I've never really, 35 years of knowing her, I've never really seen her sit and do nothing. So this is perfect. This says everything about her. A capable wife who can find. She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchants. She brings her food from far away. She rises when it is still night and provides food for her household. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid for her household when it snows, for all of her household are clothed in crimson. She makes herself coverings. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the city gates, taking his seat among the elders of the land. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her happy. Her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her a share in the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the city gates.
I think I'd like to give you a chance to relax your neck muscles, and we'll look this direction for a while. It's my custom in this church to walk and speak, so I hope you'll allow me that during this time. I'm so grateful for this service, which was chosen with much intentionality by Lorraine's family, the hymns, and reading from Proverbs. It's probably the first time I've been in a memorial service where the Proverbs were given such an honor, and I'm so grateful for that. I have come to recognize in this church that the congregation is filled with fascinating people. They look just like you and me, but there are fascinating folks in this congregation. I was reading the Discover magazine recently, and the 100 recent discoveries of 2013. And as I look through these 100 fascinating scientific discoveries of 2013, I see this discovery of a kind of a vaccine against Ebola and against, what is that other disease? It's like Ebola. It's not West Nile, it's rabies. And so before, as children, we grow up and we're this dreaded rabies. If you get bitten by a rabid animal, you have to have, the injections in the stomach. Terrifying. But someone has discovered a treatment to prevent this rabies from taking over, and Ebola, this deadly disease. And I read down to find out who the scientist is that's done this, and it's John Connor, who is a member of this church who stands right about here and sings bass. You heard this year about Sam, a 17-year-old young man who had this disease that causes him to age too rapidly. And it's a terrible story, fascinating life. And as I hear of his death, I learn immediately that the man who was teaching Sam to drive is Mark Whitehouse. There are some incredible people here in our midst. And one of my earliest days here at United Parish, I watched a woman come through the back door, and she looked like an older woman, but she stepped with greater grace over these steps than most of the other people that came into the church. It was, at the time, 97-year-old Lorraine skipping up the steps. And the more I got to know Lorraine and heard more of her story, you think about a person who was born in 1914, living until 2014, and the kind of changes a person experiences. So we've talked about the Walker Center and the international students that are part of that community. When she was born, there were 2 sovereign nations in Africa. There were 2 independent nations in Africa. And now, do any of you happen to know how many there are in Africa now? It would be impressive. It's more than 40. She lived through the Great Depression in the 30s and the Great Recession in the 2000s. She lived at a time where in the 1914s, people got around with a horse and buggy. These days, there are 40 million cars on the road. And in fact, she came from a church that got to experience an interstate being planted right in their parking lot, essentially, right? Centenary Church had an interstate that essentially ruined the church. She saw the advent of automobiles and interstates. So much she's seen in her life. In 1914, the way that folks reached out to one another was telephones or telegraph. I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago, and we sat in the lobby of a hotel FaceTiming our 14-year-old son, which for those of you who don't know, it takes an iPad on one end or a phone and a smartphone on the other end. You hit a button, it connects the 2 of you, and you can see each other and talk face to face across thousands of miles difference. The changes Lorraine had seen in her life. And so when you talk to a person like Lorraine who has lived so many years, you want to just sit at her feet and learn from her. And here's the surprising thing you learn from Lorraine, the wisdom that Lorraine has within her. And I got to this from a video that was captured by Mark in her birthday in 2011. at the Walker Center. We're going to be in that same room together later. And in that room, there's a man with a guitar who functions a bit like a pastor. Maybe you'll know the name of this man. He's a man who looks like a Filipino man, maybe, and he's playing his guitar, and he's trying to draw the story out of Lorraine. And he says, Lorraine, you have lived well into your 90s. That's a great gift. What is the secret to your old age? Tell us, Lorraine, what is the secret to your old age? And I wonder if some of you know the answer to this question. And Lorraine thought for a moment. I wish I could do a good Lorraine impersonation. She says, don't fall down. That's news to many of you. Many of you also know that that was her mantra. That's the way to live a long life. Don't fall down. Right? And so the man who was playing the guitar wanted more from her. He expected, no, the real wisdom, the real secret. That was the secret. That is the secret. To keep moving forward. There's a kind of a simplicity that we gain over time when we let go of all of that other stuff. You heard from Tricia that she had these Dr. Seuss books. There's some real magic in Dr. Seuss books. We shared it in worship earlier today. Simplicity. It reminded me of, I just came back from a youth retreat this weekend, and we told stories of wise sages on the mountaintops. There are lots of stories and jokes about the wise sage on the mountaintop and all the trouble a person goes through to get up to the wise sage. Well, remember that Lorraine lived in a house that's kind of at the mountaintop, Walker Center. And so just imagine this. So Conan the Barbarian, can you picture him? Got it? Are you not getting it from looking at this scrawny man? Come on. Conan the Barbarian, all right. Thank you. It's Arnold, all right. So Conan hears that a wise old woman is at the top of this mountain, but she's in an impenetrable fortress. And so Conan hears that this wise woman has the secret of all secrets, the secret of life. And so Conan rushes out to this fortress, and indeed he sees the fortress on the hill. And he comes to the fortress, and the first thing he encounters is a solid wooden door. And so Conan, with a loud gruff, or Arnold, goes, pow, and hits the wooden door. It flops down, and the dust flies, and Conan walks through the door. And then he encounters a little further up another door, this time wooden wrapped with iron. And so Conan takes his great shield, and what would Arnold say? You got nothing? With his shield, he pounds into this door, and it doesn't open at first, but then he pounds again, and it flops open, the iron wooden door. And then Conan walks straight up these stairs to a final door, a steel door. And Conan, puts his back against the door and pushes and pushes and pushes, and finally it bends and opens and flops down. And there at the top of these stairs, sitting in a comfortable chair with arms, is a sage old woman. And Conan says, so, I finally got to you. Tell me the secret of all secrets. And the wise old woman says, there are doorknobs, Conan. And Conan says, you speak in riddles, old woman. The wise old woman at the top of the hill here in Auburndale. Two words that I would use to describe Lorraine. This sage of Walker Center. The first word is accessible. Accessible. You know, the doors that have to be flopped open. I get the sense that anyone who wanted to sit down to talk with Lorraine, who could speak loud enough, would have her full attention. Late at night, early in the morning, especially early in the morning, she would come early to worship and she would stay late, and if you wanted to talk, she wanted to hear your story. She had 1,000 stories to share, but she wanted to hear your story. When I went to see Lorraine on the day that she died, we were gathered together in that room, and I had just come from the Holy Land. I had just been in the upper room potentially. This was the place that Jesus gathered with his disciples. He shared wisdom that last night, and the Gospel of John tells us this is the place where Jesus washed feet, where Jesus was a servant and humbled himself and served. And it seemed to me when I was in Lorraine's room that I was in the room of a servant, of one who was accessible, who was willing to serve everyone. What a great spirit in that upper room. The first word I would use is accessible, and the second is wisdom personified. I am so grateful that you chose Proverbs to frame Lorraine's life, because if you read Proverbs, you heard the story about a good wife, and I wondered what in the world are they going to share from that particular chapter of Proverbs. Proverbs casts wisdom as a woman. Maybe you think of wisdom as God. Wisdom is a woman. It's always she. It's such a rare book in the Hebrew Testament and the Bible itself. Wisdom is she. And some of the scholarly folks that Walter would hang out with would be you. They might say this is because in the ancient Near East, they took some of this Canaanite worship and imagined God, wisdom, as goddess. And they just pulled that forward. But I got a more simplistic way of looking at Proverbs. My sense is that people experience wisdom early and late in their lives coming from women who take the time to teach. People who take the time to teach are often women. The first time I went into Lorraine's house, I saw the Cat in the Hat. I mean, I saw these good theological books up here too, but I was fascinated by Cat in the Hat. And of course I heard the story of how you use this simple picture and words together to teach speech. It all just flows together, to teach speech. The earliest teachers were women. And Lorraine was a teacher, an accessible teacher. And I wondered with Carolyn, what happens to that upper room now? It's difficult as a family to go back into the room and to move through different books and treasures and decide what do you keep, what do you let go of, what do you pass on. You want to keep it all, but you can't. I wonder about that room and how we preserve the spirit of that room. How do we preserve the spirit of a room where people like Lorraine have lived and shared and taught? I hope that that room becomes a place where people encounter that spirit, that accessible spirit, a place where people can learn. That spirit of Lorraine is still in that place in the Walker Center. It is still in this place, and the spirit of Lorraine is still here. So I'm so grateful for your stories about Lorraine. I'm so grateful she was accessible, that she was wisdom personified, and I truly look forward to the stories that you will share here in a moment. The difficulty when we share these stories is everybody has several stories to share. How do we tell just a few stories so that we can eat the food at Walker Center? How do we do that? How do we honor this woman? Well, it's in living a life of service. This is Lorraine, accessible, service, servant of God. Thanks be to God for Lorraine. Amen.
sing a solo. I think about my mother from the soprano also. Reminds me of her. Claire Lorraine Holcomb. I met Lorraine sometime in the summer of 1959. As I became smitten with her daughter, I spent a great deal of time at the Holcomb homestead at 247 Grove Street. And Lorraine was usually there. During subsequent summers, Lorraine took us kids, John, Tricia, and me, on many car trips to Walden Pond, Pleasure Island, and Fawn Pond in Sherwood. We used to swim there. On one summer day at Pleasure Island, we rode the Tin Lizzies, which were small replicas of Ford Model Ts. They were on a track, but Lorraine helped me drive it anyway. The ironic thing, which escaped me at the time, I was 9 years old or 10, was that when she was growing up, they had the real Model T. Many years later, as Lorraine discovered my interest in all things with wheels, which includes trains, she also discovered that I was going to Keith's Pharmacy and buying copies of Trains magazine. She paid for a subscription to the magazine for me one Christmas. Has been doing that for me ever since. So every month, I think of her when my copy of Trains magazine arrives in the mail. And of course, Lorraine rhymes with train. Back in 2008, when Lorraine was only 93, we were on the TV show Chronicle together. The producers of the show called me and said they wanted to show the process of evaluating an elder driver. I thought about the possibilities for choosing someone to be on a program with me. It suddenly struck me, Lorraine would be perfect. She looked right over there. So I asked her if she'd like to be on the show with me. Without hesitation, she said yes. You picture Sandy, can't you? Yes. She had her entire book group praying for her. We had a great time. Her driving, me sitting beside her as the evaluator, and I'm sure she inspired other elder drivers in many ways by being on that program. And that day was one of the high points of my life. Lorraine is still ever present, and ever-present inspiration in my life. When you think about it, Lorraine's life of teaching runs through many hundreds of folks with whom she worked through the years. But especially continues through Tricia, John, and me. Our goal every day is to help people to develop their full potential. She will continue. I may not, she will. Continue to inspire us all of our days. Lorraine always brought people together, of course. She's bringing us together today. As we deeply grieve her passing, we rejoice by gathering in her name to share the stories of our lives which were so deeply affected by her. Just about every Thursday, Tricia and I drive up Grove Street on the way to a choir rehearsal. We always look to see if the lights are on in Lorraine's apartment. The lights in that upper room are now off. We'll have to look further up in the third floor Walker Center. Way up in heaven, because that is where she is now. When my parents died, I pictured them in the loving arms of Jesus. I picture Lorraine in the company of Jesus, reunited with the precious Walter. And then I picture the three of them helping others to develop to their full potential. A few days before Lorraine died, I had the opportunity to share, just talking about old times around Auburndale. That was great and gave us both comfort for the time when we would be apart. Now is the time when those of you who would like to may share some of the thoughts with the rest of us.
I just want to encourage you to raise your hand. Please introduce yourself to the rest of us and stand if you're able. And share a story, if there's a story that needs to be shared, or if there's a word that hasn't been shared about her that you'd like to share with the rest of us. Just raise your hand, I'll bring the microphone to you. I'll work my way from the front to the back, this side first.
I beat you out, Mark. I met her in '56 for Thanksgiving. A young theologue invited there, and she was a little girl then. A wonderful speaker there. Johnny, you remember that? Remember that? Remember Bruce Foreman? Oh, he was one of my classmates. So I had my first Thanksgiving away from home, and I was welcomed just like I should have been all the time. I've got to read something that was sent to me when my mother died by a parishioner from here. Dear Edward, I have just learned that you lost your mother. And while I know it was not unexpected, I also know that one is never ready to give up one's mother. It is a sad and lonely feeling to realize that one so near to you, very being, is now so far away. As old as I am, I still remember my parents and think of them often. I suppose we do best homage when we live our lives most fully, even in the shadow of our loss. This affirms the life of the one we love and also brings us closer to the source of all life. This was written by Betty Meyer.
I had the luxury of knowing Lorraine. I came to know her through the Walker Center. We came to church here and sat in the third or fourth row. I can't remember exactly which one, for about a year and a half. And I was going through a very difficult time, and she saw this. I didn't say this to her, but she saw this, and she had a way of reading people's hearts. And I used to sit here and sit beside her and think that, here we are, the lion in the lamb. And I thought of myself as a lion. And the other day, when I heard that she had passed, my friends tried to console me. I assured them that I was fine. A day later, I found myself crying. What I also realized is that she was the lion and I was the lamb.
My name is Carolyn, and I'm the manager of the Walker Center. But Lorraine was the matriarch of the Walker Center. I have had the deepest pleasure of my whole life, I think, to know Lorraine for 2.5 years. And everything that everyone has said here is absolutely true. Every single day I saw her, and she never had a bad word to say, but when you're absolutely right, that was Lorraine. She connected with everyone, whether they were our bed and breakfast guests who were only overnighters, or whether they were our long-term students. I want to read a very short email that was sent by one of our old scholars. I miss the lovely time with Lorraine in Boston. She was always filled with wisdom and humor that made me feel warm and joyful. She also introduced me to her church generously to feel the will of God. She passed away so fast. If convenient, please tell Lorraine in her memorial service for me. I miss her forever and very happy to meet her. Thanks for her passion and giving such lovely friendship to me. A Taiwanese friend named Chase says thank you very much.
I'm Fran Vogel, I'm the current president of the board at Walker Center, and I've known Lorraine, I'm guessing 25 years. When I first came to Walker Center as a new person in Boston to learn about peace and justice and to celebrate the community at Walker Center, Lorraine welcomed me, introduced me to people who I came to know so well in those many years, and I will always give thanks for her generous sharing of her time and her energy and her humor. And in the toughest time, when something had exploded in the basement and water was dripping down the wall and something else was going on, Lorraine said to me, you know, Fran, Walker Center has been here a long time, and it will keep on being. But we've got to clean up these things and move on. Come on, let's go. How can I help you? And I think there's a community of people that Lorraine reached out to help and to empower as she got so many people ready to face the future in new ways. I give thanks and celebrate her life and the love that she has shared, that's being shared and helping people all around the world today.
Hi, my name's Bill Tangway. I take care of the Walker Center, and I had the pleasure of having breakfast every morning with Lorraine for the last few years. And I can remember every morning, the first thing she'd say to me is, so what's the big project we're working on today? You know, and every day she'd want to know what's new, what's the big project. And she always was willing to help out. She was willing to help me clean, whatever I had to do. She wanted to pitch in and help, and she was such a great lady. And the pleasure of working at the Walker Center, I get to bring my grandson with me. Well, I would bring Logan to work, and Miss Lorraine would steal him. She would spend hours every day when he was with me, playing dominoes with him, helping him read stories, and he had this fetish about the Titanic. And she happened to have a children's book about the Titanic. So even in her later years, she was always there, no matter whether you were 30 years old or 7 years old, she was there to help. And she was such a great and wonderful woman. It's been a pleasure knowing her, and she'll be a memory of my life forever.
Well, I lived in Walker Center for 5 years, and it was about 8 years ago when I first came to US, and literally I had 3 words in English: hi, and something like this. And then one day I met Lorraine in Walker Center, and she said, hey, you know what? You need English, and I can teach you. And I said, well, how could it possibly be true that you can teach me English, because I know nothing about English with very spoken English? And she said, well, that's good, because I can teach you English in English. And then we took the two Bible. She read, and I listen, and she listened while I read. And then now I'm a student in BU School of Theology. And if I pick one word about Lorraine, I would say legendary. Oh, Mr. Fred, go ahead.
I'm Stephen Holcomb, the eldest of the 2 Holcomb grandsons, and if there's one thing I'm known for, it's not keeping anything short. Today I'll make an exception for that. And also make it as I go along. To me, the one thing that was constant in my life was my grandmother's presence, whether it be trying to help me read or just being there for me. And was notorious for hating the written word for the first 14 odd years of my life, despite my grandmother's intentions of trying to help me read. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school where I finally started enjoying books for the way that they are. They are stories, and that's what Lorraine is all about. Stories, keeping them, sharing them, trying to communicate with people as a peacemaker through stories. And you would probably be proud to know that despite the fact I'm barely having time to read for myself, I'm still trying to read as keeping her with me. In fact, I'm trying to read one of the hardest books to comprehend, Atlas Shrugged. She was all about the story. And that's what I think about her.
I'm Matthew Holcomb, the youngest of the two grandsons, and I wish I could make this up while I go along. Lorraine was a very important person in my life when I was growing up. I had a very difficult time making friends, being myself, and she was always there to help support me and introduce to new people. And because of her, I managed to figure out one of the important lessons of friendship, having to make friends, keeping them. I met a lot of good people at the Barn House, thanks to her, like Michael, Linsa, and a couple of other people. And when I think about myself, is that she helped me kind of express who I am now, and without her, I wouldn't have that. And it's hard-taking that now that I don't really have her anymore, it's really hard for me to try and cope with, like, okay, am I going to change? Am I going to do the same? But I think back to my young childhood and thinking of what she would say, just be yourself, and you can do anything that you put your mind to.
This side first.
My name's Valerie, and I never met Lorraine, but I feel like today that I know her a little better than I did a while ago. I see that she left a beautiful family, beautiful legacy, and the stories people have told about her are very touching. I got to know about Lorraine through her daughter-in-law, Amy, and I realized what a wonderful relationship they had. And when you hear so many struggles between mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, I love to hear the stories that Amy told. And there are a few people here from Beth Yeshua because of Amy and how she loved her mother-in-law. And I was always so very touched about it. I remember one little story that Amy told when she was talking with Lorraine about the Bible and something that Amy had quoted, and Lorraine said, "Oh, does the Bible say that?" And they had a discussion about it, and I thought, what a lovely, spontaneous give and take relationship they had, and what respect and love they had for each other. And the last years of her life, I know how much Amy was devoted to her, and that can only be because she was such a lovely lady. And also today I learned one more thing about her that I can remember: don't fall down.
Yeah, that's good stuff, isn't it?
It's wonderful to see everybody. My name is Barbara Terrio, and I'm so fond of Lorraine. She entered my life about 40 years ago when I lived in Wellesley. And the first thing I can remember, one of my first memories, is that she brought me a bag of fresh green beans. from the big garden that she and Walter had on Grove Street. I can still taste them. They were really the best beans I've ever had. And I know that they were grown with love. But as recently as 3 weeks ago, I got a letter from Lorraine. Beautiful handwriting, just as Tricia said. 3 pages. And I had recently told her that I was babysitting my grandchildren, and some days were a little testy, and the kids were rambunctious. I think Lorraine saw that as an opportunity to help me. So she went on to tell me about a game I could play with the children so I could get some peace and, and also share things with them. She told me that as the older sister in her life, she had younger siblings she was responsible to play with. At times it was overwhelming. So she developed this game, which she passed on to me, and I'm using now with the children. This is 3 weeks ago she's telling me this. So the game is that it's kind of like hide and seek, and you go into the closet. She tells the children that they've got to find her. It's like a treasure hunt, only with people. So she puts a sign in the closet where she was supposed to be. The children go there, her sisters go there. She's not there. They find a note. Go to the back room or something. So the children go to the back room and there's another note. And everything along the way is another place that the children have to go and find another note. All the time, Lorraine has found, I don't know, half an hour worth of peace and quiet because the children are all over the place. And it was just such a Lorraine moment. And I thought, well, that's wonderful. But then she went on and she said, and there's another thing you can do too. She said you can take them to the library and you can use a game I play, which is to start with the alphabet A through Z and have the children go somewhere in the library to find an author or a book that starts with a letter. So she was telling me these things in my letter 3 weeks ago, and at the end she said, well, that's all the wisdom I have for today. Love, Lorraine. And it'll be with me in my heart forever. She is just a precious, inspirational human being that is now larger than life. I appreciate it. And there's one thing Lorraine taught me, is to speak very loud.